So, the Educational Supervisor's Report is the most important document for your ARCP. It's a joint document produced between yourself as a trainee and your educational supervisor. To complete an Educational Supervisor's Report, you will go on to your dashboard, and then on the right hand side of your screen, there will be Create Annual Educational Supervisor's Report. Once you have clicked on that, make sure that your name is right and make sure you choose the right training year. So for this trainee, we are making sure this trainee is an ST2, and the date of the last ARCP we would assume would have been around summer last year. So this brings it on to the first page of the Educational Supervisor's Report. So the first bit is the date of the meeting. So that's usually the day in which you're planning to meet with your educational supervisor to complete this form. Then it's the name of your educational supervisor. It's very important that you search for your educational supervisor and add them on, because that will give them access to view this. Then the next bit is a date to obtain CCT. So if you are a full-time trainee, that should be quite clear to you. But if you're less than full-time trainee, please make sure you use a CCT calculator and calculate this accurately. And you will also need to upload your CCT calculator later on. Date due to enter the next training year. So this again, usually for full-time trainees, this will be your August rotation. But for less than full-time trainees, this could be halfway through your rotation. Date of the last ARCP is self-evident, is the date in which you were ARCP. And then the next box is the outcome that you were given at the last ARCP. So for this particular trainee, we are saying that this trainee got outcome 10.1 because they had met all the competencies of SD1 apart from lacking one sign-off for a cervical smear, which, as you know, is a delegated competency, so they were able to progress through. The next is a date that you have sat or passed MRCOG Part 1. And again, because they're only as being assessed for ST2 level, we have not completed the dates for Part 2 or Part 3. And we've given the number of previous sitting, which could be relevant if someone hasn't passed their exam. Then the final section is the training post attachment. So this is about how many of the months are counting towards the CCT. So you would put in when the person started the placement and when you expect to finish placement. So this is not the date of the ARCP, but it's actually when you'll be moving on. So in this particular case, that will be 12 months, which means that they have got 24 months in total counting towards their CCT. Then it's a number of meetings between the education supervisor and the trainee, and to check it, you can click on the tab which you just clicked and you can see all the meetings, so that will help you count that. The final section is absences, and the first question it asks is whether you have recorded all your absences on the ePortfolio. It's very important that you do actually record this. So this could be as a reflective log, or you can do this as a separate log entry where you mention the days in which you have been absent and any relevant reflections if that's appropriate. So if this is a day or two of being sick, just having a log and the reason will be enough. But if it's a prolonged period of sickness, then maybe about what measures that you have taken since coming back and whether you need any sort of support returning to work might be relevant here. And again, make sure that you upload that evidence with your educational supervisor's report. It's very important that at the bottom of the page you can see a little box saying are all trainee fields aside from the final trainee feedback complete, that you do not tick this until you have completed the entire form and you are absolutely happy with it, because once you have ticked this, you will not be able to go back and edit that. Okay, so this is the section 2. It's very important that before you start the section 2 that you have done SIP assessment with your educational supervisor, and because that will pull through. So as you can see, I'm using the example of Ashling's And you can see that she has already done SIP assessment with her educational supervisor, and that has pulled through here. So then the next section is subspecialty recommended outcome. As this trainee is only an ST2, that they do not need to complete this. This is only relevant for subspec trainees. The section after that is procedure summary. So it goes through every single procedure. It asks whether you have done any formative OSATs. So if you have done that, you just click yes. And then it goes through how many summative OSATs you've done. Now it's very important, if you look at it, if you just go back to the old bit, if you look at it, it has OSATs under the post 2019 curriculum and OSATs under the pre 2019 curriculum. The importance of that, again, for this particular trainee is not going to be relevant because this trainee is likely to have started after 2019 if they're ST2 at the moment. But for the senior trainees, it's very important that if you have any OSATs in your old portfolio, that you actually take a screenshot of that and upload a PDF version of it in your portfolio so that we can access it. And then there is a box asking if the competency is achieved. So you just have to click yes or no. As you're aware, for a competency to be achieved, you would need to have 3 competent summative OSATs, at least one of it which is completed by a consultant. So this section is fairly straightforward. Okay, so this is the next section, which is the matrix summary. So this is where you present all the appropriate work-based assessment for this trainee. So let's start with case-based discussion. So if you click on link assessment, and this is where you will link any assessments done since your last ARCP. And again, we can search for it by case-based discussion. This trainee is not particularly good, has only done 1 case-based discussion. So we can link that. And then the next section says case-based discussion requirements met. Now there is no set number. However, overall the quality of the work-based assessments is what's being assessed. So the question is, are your work-based assessments appropriate for your level of training? And again, you do the same thing for your mini KEXs, NOTs, and OSATs. So again, it's very important that you attach all the OSATs that you have done since your last ARCP, both summative and formative. And same thing again for your team observation forms. And same thing again for your reflective log entries. That's very important that you attach all of these in there. Okay, so now this section is very important. This is the other evidence since last ARCP. So this is where you would absolutely need to upload your CCT calculator. You might also want to upload other evidence relevant to this year. So for this particular trainee, things like basic ultrasound course, 3rd degree tear course, step up course, as well as evidence that you have passed your exams and your GMC NETS TEF survey. So you would want these all uploaded, and then other requirements you may want to specify that you have met all the matrix requirement for ST2 and where you can find this evidence. This makes it really easy for your educational supervisor and makes it really easy for the panel, and you can confirm that you have met all the recommended requirements for that particular year. If for whatever reason you have not met any requirements for a year, then you can unclick the matrix requirement met, and you can outline, for example, if you have not managed to go on an ultrasound course, you might want to put that there, and it might be useful in that case to say when you're planning to go on that, because that might give the ARCP panel some reassurance. So now we come on to the section 4. This is revalidation. This is a very important section because remember, your ARCP is not just to assess your progress but also for your revalidation. So it asks whether you've been involved in any serious event investigations, whether there have been any complaints, whether there have been any compliments, and whether you have been involved in any probity issue. So you answer that accordingly, and make sure that your Form R, which I should have mentioned this, sorry, that this would have also been uploaded under other evidence, that your Form R and this match up. So anything recorded here should also be recorded in your Form R, and we would absolutely expect any complaints or any serious untoward incident or any probity issues, that there will also be a reflective log that outlines that into significant amount of details. Then the next section is please advise any pastoral issues that you need to discuss with the ARCP panel. So this is very, very useful. So if there are multiple investigations that are going on that you think has an impact on your training, if you've had health issues that have an impact on your training, or if you feel that your particular placement wasn't suitable for your training, it's very important that you outline these into detail, because this allows the ARCP panel to take this into consideration whilst forming a global judgment about your training. So now we come on to the sections that need to be filled by the educational supervisor. So this can only be filled once the trainee has ticked the box saying that all sections have been completed, because only then it allows the supervisor to fill this in. So when you log on to your portfolio, you will get to your dashboard and you should be able to find your trainee. So if we click on your trainee and then we scroll right down to the bottom, this trainee has had a rather significant number of ARCPs, but if you look on the 29th of March, you can click on view this ESR and then you can click edit. So the section, again, this will give you an opportunity to correct anything if you don't think it's correct. But again, this should ideally be done in conjunction with your trainee, because you don't really want to be correcting things unless you're absolutely sure and with the consent of your trainee. So then the first section that you will review each section. So you'll review the general section, you'll review the SIPs and procedures section, and then you will review the matrix requirement. So this allows you a chance to see all of that. So if we scroll further down in this section, so the first question it asks is, are you aware that the trainee has been involved in any conduct, capability or serious untoward incidents? So in this particular case, we're saying this trainee has. And second thing is whether you're aware that all of these issues have been resolved. So in this particular case, as it could be quite commonplace, there could be ongoing headship investigations, and as we know, these can often take months, and if it involves coroner's court, it could even take years before they are resolved. So that is not a reflection on the trainee in any way, but it's very useful in your comments to outline in more detail about what is going on. So here under the comment, I've said the trainee involved in an SUI, baby required cooling, but the local review completed, and there are no concerns about this particular trainee's involvement. However, the final headship report is awaited, and it's the final headship report that will conclude this particular process. But this gives a reassurance to the ARCP panel that they do not need to be concerned about this trainee's training or this trainee progressing further. So now we come on to the global judgment, section 5, which is completed by the educational supervisor, and arguably this is the most important bit of the report, and more information you can provide in this report, better it is, because you are giving us a global judgment on this trainee, and you're giving the ARCP panel plenty of information for them to make the judgment. So the first question is whether you overall consider this trainee is meeting the expectation for this stage of training. So you say yes or no, and it's worth justifying. And again, you want to show that they are meeting good progress, and this is with the non-clinical SIPs. And if they are not meeting good progress, you might want to say why they're not meeting. So it might be that they haven't provided enough evidence for those SIPs. Second bit is the clinical specialty SIPs. So again, whether they are meeting the entrustability required for this stage. So as this trainee is being assessed at SD2 level, they need to, by the end of the year, they need to have been at least entrustability level 2 for every single clinical set. So that's what you're assessing them again. So again, made the comment that the trainee has made good progress throughout the year, have demonstrated ability to work with direct supervision, which is entrustability level 2, but in certain instances is able to work with indirect supervision, which is entrustability level 3. And as expected with many trainees, this particular trainee has met entrustability level 2 throughout. But in obstetric, where this trainee has had more exposure to, has met entrustability level 3 and clearly is able to make the progress into SD3. If you're not sure of what level of entrustability your trainee needs to be at, if you go to the RCOG training matrix and you scroll right down to the bottom, it outlines the entrustability required against the level of training. The next section is future recommendation for the new educational supervisor. So this is very useful, especially if your trainee, this particular trainee, is leaving your unit or going to a different unit, or if they have a new educational supervisor. So here, as this trainee was concentrating on part 1 exam, they didn't really have enough time or space to do ultrasound learning. So I have recommended that they have regular scanning sessions so they can develop their competency, because that's one of the SD3 competencies they need to meet. And as with many trainees in the early part of their training, because they were concentrating on the SD2 requirements, which are obstetric heavy, they haven't really had much exposure to gynecological theatre. So again, to make sure that they have a well-rounded training, I've recommended that they have regular gynecological theatre sessions in their next year. So this will be quite useful for the college tutor and the educational supervisors when planning the rota and creating a personalized template for this training. Now the final bit is global judgment, and this is very, very important. So first bit is whether you're clicking whether they progress to the next year of training, and then what we really want every single educational supervisor to do is recommend an outcome at this ARCP. You know these trainee best, you have reviewed all the evidence, so you are at the best position to recommend an outcome. Here I have said I recommend that this trainee is awarded an outcome 1 and progress to SD3. And then I am demonstrating why this trainee has got an outcome 1. So I'm trying to show why this particular person meets, so I'm justifying my recommendation. So I'm clearly saying, so this is again, I'm showing that this person meets all the requirements of the matrix, so has passed part 1, has got all the required relevant OSETs, so I've outlined them. So I'm again demonstrating to the ARCP panel that all the evidence is clearly there. And this is particularly relevant for some of the senior trainees where some of the OSATs might be in the old portfolio. So it is really worth signposting them and telling them where they are, because otherwise the ARCP panel will not be able to see it. For newer trainees entirely on the new portfolio, it's a bit more straightforward to see where all these OSATs are. I'm also telling them that I've looked through the workplace-based assessments and they have been spread out throughout the year and they are of a good quality. I'm also showing them that there's a good quality of reflections, and I've read through these reflections, which are again important part of the global judgment. And again, I'm showing them that they've done other e-learning which are relevant for the year. They've got good quality TO2 and good satisfactory comments. And I'm also demonstrating that this trainee has done all the required courses for the matrix. So step up, basic ultrasound theory, basic practical skills, prompt, and 3rd degree tear course. And I've also outlined and signposted where this evidence could be found. So if this section is completed properly, then that should really walk the ARCP panel through to the outcome, because if you can demonstrate what outcome needs to be awarded and shown clear evidence of why this has to be awarded, then it's very unlikely that the ARCP panel is going to disagree with your recommendation, and therefore it's very unlikely that there will be an upset on the day of the ARCP. So this is the final section for the trainee to complete. So once your trainer has completed the global judgment, ideally this has been done together, but it might have been done remotely. It's very important that you review everything that your trainer has written there. So you go through it line by line and review that, and you check the global judgment by your trainer and what outcome you have been recommended and whether you are happy with that. If you are happy with that recommendation, you will then tick I agree with this recommendation. And then in which case the next section you don't necessarily need to fill in. It may be useful if you think the educational supervisor hasn't outlined where a particular evidence is and it's not obvious. You may want to fill that in to signpost the ARCP panel, but otherwise you can leave it blank. However, what is important is that if you disagree with the judgment of your trainer, which is perfectly your right to do, then you would write in there why you disagree. So, and again, give as much detail as possible. You can give as much detail as possible. You can write in, which particular part of your portfolio where evidence for what you're saying can be met, because again, it allows the ARCP panel to take that into consideration. And once you have done that, you tick that box and then you click save, and your educational supervisor's report is then complete.